All right, folks, good morning and welcome to the third Thursday Web Forum for the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy Partnership, or SECAS. My name is Hillary Morris. I work on user support and communications for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. And this Web Forum is intended as an opportunity to share exciting science in the world of landscape conservation in the Southeast and Caribbean, to share the latest updates on the Conservation Blueprint and get input and involvement from folks like y'all. So we really appreciate you being here this morning. Here's our agenda. I'll start by introducing our speaker who will present for 30 to 40 minutes or so on the monthly topic. We'll have time for Q&A and discussion at the end. I'll wrap up by previewing next month's webinar so y'all know what to expect, and then we'll wrap up with some updates from your SECAS staff. I am recording this webinar, as you probably saw, just as an option for the one or two folks who wanted to attend but had a conflict. I will post the slides and a link to the recording to the calendar event on the SECAS website within a couple of days. Any questions or comments before we get started? All right, and it is my pleasure to introduce Roger Cain, who is a tribal ethnobotanist with the Office of Environmental Services and Historic Preservation of the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee in Oklahoma. He's going to talk about the efforts of the tribe and their partners to restore native river cane, which is a cultural keystone species that has been reduced to only a fraction of its former range across the region. So, Roger, feel free to share your slides and take it away.
All right. Okay, well, thank you, Hillary, for the introduction. I'm going to say my name again. My name is Roger Cain. I'm a member of the United Keetoowah Band. I'm a tribal ethnobotanist with the tribe. So we're focusing on river cane as a conservation area for our preservation department as well as our environmental department, because river cane covers both aspects. And we'll start right here. This is a cane break on the Barren Fork Creek. The little shoots coming out and going into the grass right there. That's a little baby cane break that's no more than 6 months old, and it's trying to grow out in the field. This farmer won't let it. He'll come through there and cut it all down. But this is a really cool cane break. For a cane break to be producing like combs this size, which is about 12 feet tall, with the babies, they'll go another 2 feet into adulthood. Some will be 20 feet. This cane break have been it will identify to be over 100 years old, and it's a pretty cool cane break. It produces some huge cane break. It's been abused for the last 10 years with the weather and everything. So the next one is we're talking about cane break status. Cane breaks make up less than 2% of where they were over 500 years ago. And we can use the native population to help explain that a little bit better. So a little over 500 years ago, this country was discovered, and all those native people were here. We populated this continent by 100%. Fast forward to today, the native population here in the United States is less than 2%. It's like at 1.5, maybe 1.9%. And river cane can be correlated the same way as well. It's lost 98% of its base since discovery in this continent. There's a lot of reasons why. There's some good reasons and bad reasons. So we'll go on. Again, these little baby cane shoots coming up, and you see little white sleeves on them. That tells you they're less than 3 years old. But this many of those sleeves on there tells you it's less than a year old. River cane is a member of the grass family. It is one of 3 indigenous bamboos to North America. The other 2 are switch cane and hill cane. The name in front of the cane pretty much tells you how it grows, where it grows. Like river cane grows along streams and rivers. And then the switch cane comes from whenever it switches over from the coastal regions into the highlands. And that's all across the southeastern United States. And then the hill cane, which is just recently discovered last 10, 15 years ago. And it's in the Appalachia Mountains. And it's a deciduous. The other 2, river cane and switch cane, are both evergreens. But hill cane is deciduous bamboo. So those are 3 indigenous bamboos in North America, with river cane being the largest of the 3. And a lot of these cane breaks are really old ecosystems. And the way we've been able to establish is here in Oklahoma, we have what you call the Pioneer Papers, where it was a project done during the Depression. And so they would go out and they'd interview people native people, any people that would be willing to talk, so people that have jobs. And so they would talk about the areas. And this one's talking about this area here in Adair County. And it too is on Barren Fork Creek. And they talk about, as soon as the Cherokees came over here in 1839, that the buffalo would migrate down here to this cane break during the wintertime. There's other areas here in Cherokee and Adair County where they have called Elk Landing, where I've been able to determine the reason it was named Elk Landing is because during the winter time, the elk would migrate down here to the canebrake down there along Tin Killer Lake. That's how it got Elk Landing. This is a cool spot. This is one of the project spots we got for the NIFWIF grant we just got awarded. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the canebrakes you see now are some of these are really remnants of really old ecosystems. And really one of these days, I'm hoping, have you heard the aspens in the Rocky Mountains and the Sierras and everything, how they're like hundreds of years old because these ecosystems, because they're just one plant and all the ecosystems. River cane's the same way. Aspens grow by rhizomes. River cane goes by rhizomes as well. So if there was some way we could correlate, be able to determine how old these canebrakes are with the same science we do with the aspens, that would be really cool. We could show that these ecosystems are really old ecosystems. But these are remnant ones, and you find them in different places because they're trying to exist. They're hanging on by a toenail. What happened a lot of times, this is another account for along the Arkansas River going in from Fort Gibson to Muskogee here in northeast Oklahoma. Interviewing people along Fort Gibson, they were talking about these Carolina parakeets. They were really predominant all along the bottomlands of our streams and rivers all through the early 20th century, well, till the late 19th century when they disappeared because the canebrakes were starting to disappear, and also the farmers and ranchers would kill the parakeets because they go after these little cuckleborers around their fields thinking they were good. They were going after their crops. And these parakeets were really friendly creatures. I like reading about them, how they were friendly. You'd kill one, they'd hang around and try to take care of it, and that's how the farmers and ranchers killed them all off. And plus the habitats disappeared. So that's really important where there's so many species that were using canebrakes are no longer here, and there's so many that use it still now that are really dwindling down to nothing. Another thing that happened with canebrakes, when DeSoto came in to North America, he quickly learned that the canebrakes were a great place to put their cattle and their pigs in there for the nighttime while they went out and terrorized all the native people. And so they'd come back and their creatures would still be in canebrakes all fattened up, and then they could keep on going across southeastern United States terrorizing native people looking for that gold. So if you look at this is a river. This is a wintertime here on I can't remember the name of this creek right now here in northeast Oklahoma. And look how desolate the trees are around. This is wintertime in that evergreen canebrake right there. If you go to a canebrake in the wintertime, there's all sorts of life in and around it all throughout the year, but in wintertime especially. And so we as native people, we always knew the best hunting grounds were around canebrakes. That's why the Cherokees fought the Shawnee over the Kentucky canebrakes and the Illinois canebrakes, because those were great hunting grounds. And so these are great habitats for creatures during wintertime. And again, what they found out all through the 19th century, these canebrakes are pretty much what fed this country. It's because you got to remember, back then we didn't have the square bales, round bales of hay to feed the livestock during the winter, so they had to find a place to feed them. And farmers and ranchers that had canebrakes on their land would rent out these canebrakes to other ranchers to store their livestock during the winter. And all through the 19th century, you can read about how canebrakes fattened up cows and fattened up pigs and made them have better calves, all that stuff. So that's what happened to it. I'd like to know more about Chisholm Trail. I do think they followed canebrakes up and down all through Oklahoma and Texas to Kansas to take their cattle to market. So here's a cool correlation with river cane. When I was ground truthing with Cherokee Nation a few years back, we were ground truthing for river cane here on tribal land. So I got to add right here, this northeastern Oklahoma area right here, this is the jurisdiction of the United Keetoowah Band and also the Cherokee Nation. The United Keetoowah Band came here to northeastern Oklahoma 20 years before the big Trail of Tears removal group came here to northeastern Oklahoma. So there's a yin yang thing going on right there. But that's all our jurisdiction there in northeast Oklahoma. But the red dots right there, those are the lands of the Cherokee Nation. It's about 60,000 acres. Whereas UKB, we have maybe 200 acres here in northeast Oklahoma. So we're the little brother here. So what's cool about this, when I was ground truthing all this land is 60,000 acres, we only found 70 acres of canebrakes on this land. And we found right here in this area, this red arrow pointing here in this county, this is Adair County right here. This is the most populated area of Keetoowah and or Cherokee members in the whole country. The largest population live in this area right in here. And where the red dots are, that's where they're mostly located. What's cool is the bears. When we did the ground truth thing, we found that 98% of the cane breaks were right there in that area. And there's a whole lot more cane in that area because there's a lot of streams. It's very remote. And then this article came out in the Tulsa World about 3 or 4 years ago showing the bear populations. So that's a cool representation of what cane breaks do, the area and remoteness and everything with bears, with creatures. So river cane provides habitat for a lot of endangered and species. You go from passenger pigeon, the Carolina parakeet. They're gone. I like reading about them. And they were known to frequent cane breaks quite a bit. And then the newest one is the bottom here, this little moth. It's named after a famous Cherokee chief. They just discovered it about 10 years ago, but they found this moth like 50 years, and it was in the collection. Somebody studied it. There's like about a dozen different moths that are endemic to cane breaks that nobody knows about, that they're cane breaks, nobody studied. The long-eared bats, there's like about 7 colonies still left here in North America, and 3 of them are here in northeast Oklahoma, and all of them near cane break. So it's pretty cool how they're correlated together. And so these are some of the creatures that are in there. I'm still yet to see a cane rattler. I want to see one of these days come across one. So this goes back to my grad school days right here, 2007. That's why it's all murky and everything, but I like to keep it in here. This is a great selling point with everybody right here, is that river cane can reduce phosphorus and nitrogen pollution by 90%. This was in 2005, but now they're going about and they're saying it's 100%. What that's saying is you have a 10-meter buffer area between the stream and the field on the downslope from the field down to the stream. You'll catch 100% of the nitrogen and phosphorus runoff in the ground and surface water. And it's pretty cool, and I'll show you how it works here in a little bit. That's a really big thing right there. And that helps get with the farmers and ranchers. And it turns out they can do other stuff with the cane break as well. So we're having a river cane gathering April 4th through 6th here in Tahlequah with the Forest Service and the River Cane Gathering Group. We've been working this group for about 3 or 4 years now, trying to get this gathering going. Then COVID hit, but I think this time it's going to work. I'm excited about it. And so if you guys would, the website's at the bottom. Please register and come on down. We're going to talk river cane. I'm looking forward to it. The guy that did the research about the phosphorus and nitrogen, he's going to be here. I'm really excited about talking to him about that, maybe replicating more experiments with some other places around here. But that's a big selling point for river cane, for sure. So another group that's really starting to really do some river cane work is River Cane Restoration Alliance. It's with the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a pretty good group, and where this is mainly federal stuff, but they're getting tribal members in there too. That's really good. Both groups really helping push river cane. And I'm really glad of that. Looking forward to more projects they can be doing. So just recently, we were awarded the America the Beautiful through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to do river cane conservation work here in Oklahoma and Arkansas. It's for doing about 1 million acres of land, and here in Oklahoma on the wildlife management areas. There's 4 here in 8 area in Cherokee County. Then there's one big one at Sequoia National Wildlife Refuge, about 30,000 acres. Then we're going to do the Ozark Forest and the St. Francis Forest. What we're doing is we're going to target the access areas first, where the public interacts with the environment, with the outdoors. And if there's river cane, those access areas, we're going to clean them up and make them more conducive to growing and expanding cane breaks. So this is a cool grant. It's a 4-year grant. I'm excited. We'll have a river cane crew that's just going to focus on river cane conservation. I'm really excited about that. One of the things we're going to be doing is like connecting fragmented cane breaks. A lot of cane breaks are fragmented, where people are putting roads in there, or where it's just working on it's just kind of falling apart because trees are coming through there, and the roots of the cane will kind of fight with the trees, and it doesn't do so well, but it does bear with other weeds. So if you look back behind the sign right here, there's a cane break right here. Excuse me. And there's some little patches that are right here and some over here. So what we do is we'll take these trees out right here and take the coverage down, try to join these together. This be here in 3 years. This will be all river cane right here. I'm looking forward to this. This is on the Mulberry River. Another thing we'll be doing in cane breaks, this happens quite a bit in cane breaks. When it floods, they'll flood into a cane break, and it'll get jammed up because the cane will hold all the sediment and stuff. And so what'll happen will be a big old dump of trash will come in outside of big pools around it. And what happens, it'll keep building up. You'll see those big old pools where river cane will grow into those depression areas because it knows it fills up full of water. Because it fills up full of debris and dirt and everything, it gets higher, and cane will move into it. But in the meantime, we can go in here and we can take this trash out, pull this trash out, and that's a big thing. And it turns out cane breaks are great carbon sinks, and so we've done some stuff with river cane gathering, getting people to talk about river cane as a carbon sink. Hold on, guys. It's a drink. The next one what we're going to be doing is we'll be moving invasive species. This is at Sequoia Refuge. The high point up here, this is going up a hillside right here. There's cane all through here. There's cane right through here. But we remove all this honeysuckle. This is a bunch of honeysuckle. There's cane underneath it. You can't even see the sunlight underneath there. But we'll be removing honeysuckle, privet, Bradford pears from areas because they all compete with river cane. They all want that spot on the streams with sunlight. Another big thing with cane breaks going on right now is we remove the saplings. Even though this is a medicine, this is a water locust, black locust, not sure right now. This is a medicine tree, but other trees, little saplings going up, cane breaks. We're just trying to take the competition out so the cane can get healthy. River cane wants to be a mono ecosystem. But what's happening here the last few years with cane breaks is that there's a lot of die-off in cane breaks. Well, the extended droughts we're getting a lot of these places here in Oklahoma and other places. But what's happening is these extreme cold spells that are coming in, which dipping below 0 degrees. It's killing the younger ones. So right here where my pointer is, you can see these little sleeves on here. Like when we started, I showed you how young those were. These are all less than a year old right here. So what's happening, these extreme freezes going down below 0 for like 3-4 days. It's killing these guys off, these young ones off. And so these are all dead young ones right here. So that's why we get more and more dead stuff. So the older mature ones are surviving throughout the cold winter. I mean, these extreme cold patches, but there's no babies coming up. They're just getting killed off and just shrinking the size of the cane over and over. But it's just something that's really strange that's going on. But I don't know what to say. That's something what's causing these bunch of dead cane, these canes right here. Excuse me. So I'm here at the end of it. This is my grandma and grandpa pumpkin. If it wasn't for them letting me and my uncles go play in the cane breaks when we were kids on Barefoot Creek, then I wouldn't be able to talk about river cane like I do now. So don't let dog go hunt ease. We'll see you again. But I'll take questions if you guys want. If I can escape out of this. Hope I didn't talk too fast, or we can go back to these slides.
No, that's wonderful, Roger. Thank you so much for that great presentation. That's some really exciting work, and I learned a ton about river cane. Louise, I see that you have your hand up.
Always, I had a question, and Roger, we had spoken before, and I was really kind of interested about general awareness of river cane as both a cultural keystone ecosystem and a resource. And you had told me kind of a story that this might be a habitat type or an ecosystem that has kind of been under promoted or not really widely talked about. And you told me a really fascinating story about, I think, the Cincinnati Zoo and how that kind of called attention to the decline of this ecosystem. And I would love to hear that story again. I thought that was fascinating.
Okay, it was the Memphis Zoo. It was, I started my grad work in 2007. So it was the early 2000s whenever they brought the pandas to the Memphis Zoo. And so when they were doing it, they ran out bamboo to feed those panda bears. And so they started looking for other sources. So they found river cane. They were working with Mississippi State University. And so they started working with river cane, feeding those panda bears river cane. And so they start feeding it to them. Panda bears are eating all the cane up. Then they realized they couldn't get any more cane. So they're at Mississippi State. That's why they have a big, nice website and everything. Started studying river cane at the time. And so whenever they ran out river cane feed those panda bears. They had sent them back to China. They got some other ones because all they would eat was river cane. They wouldn't eat that other bamboo. So they brought the new pandas back in. But what that told Mississippi State is that, hey, there's a new study area, river cane. So they did a study at the time there in Mississippi, and they found out that the river cane there in Mississippi, the genetic diversity wasn't large enough. So if river cane goes to seed in some of those areas, people will not come back. So that's why Mississippi State has a big presence on the web with their website about river cane, and they're one of the first universities to start doing that, really going after it. And so yeah, it was pretty cool about the panda things. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. Thank you. Alex, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of partners like the Corps of Engineers and the Forest Service, but it also seemed to me from your presentation like a lot of these areas are kind of adjacent to working ag lands. And so I'm curious if you've had much success partnering with agencies like NRCS or the Conservation Commission there in Oklahoma.
We have not. We have not. What's happened with river cane with farmers and ranchers is that river cane has been so villainized that even say river cane around some farmers or ranchers, they want no part of it because it invades, you know, and it's like, well, river cane really doesn't grow that fast. But so what we got to do is change the paradigm on what people feel about river cane, especially farmers and ranchers in these rural areas, because they grew up thinking river cane was bad because it poked holes in their horses or the cows' feet, or it just grew too fast and take over their field. But no, we haven't had much opportunity to work with them. I'm hoping with this river cane gathering we'll get a little bit more publicity. Maybe they'll start reaching out. I reached out, but we haven't had any success so far. Fingers crossed it'll change in the future.
Thank you.
So that's a great question. I can see that aligning really well with, stream best management practices and trying to keep livestock out of the stream from a conservation perspective, especially if it's having that amazing filtration benefit that you pointed out earlier, which is kind of mind-blowing that would be so effective. Yvonne, do you have a question?
More of a comment and a kudos. Thank you for this presentation. This was really great. I had been working with the Corps of Engineers they have these restoration reaches in the Mississippi River Batcher area where they're trying to do some restoration, and the River Cane Alliance and River Cane restoration is something that they've been keeping in their mind as they're developing these plans. So it's really exciting that it's happening in lots of other areas. I saw that one of your project areas was unfortunately south of the reach that they're looking at. They're looking from like the Loosahatchee to the Hatchie River in that area. So if you're not already engaged in that process, I would definitely encourage you to be mindful and engaged in that. And I can send some information as well. But the other comment that I wanted to make is, and this kind of relates to that project, is that river cane was historically a part of that larger lower Mississippi floodplain area and really provided habitat for some of the aquatic species. So I'm most interested in alligator gar, and they key in on areas that look exactly like some of these cane breaks. They're looking for kind of low vegetation, mostly open, not the, complete canopy cover that you get from cypress or some of these other bottomland species. So I'm really encouraged that river cane restoration is getting a greater spotlight than it has before. It's really cool.
Sure. I'm really glad Army Corps of Engineers is really getting active with it, because that's where a lot of cane is located in their areas.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, with the river being so channelized right now, it doesn't provide the same kind of conditions as historically, where you would get it spread out over a broad area. Now it's kind of channelized, so the water goes up and down really fast and stays for a while. So it's a tough thing to balance.
What is that?
Thanks for that, Yvonne. David, I see your hand up. I'm going to do this one question from the chat, and then we'll go to you. Elaine asks, how do you control the honeysuckle and privet without chemicals? So kind of how are you doing your invasive species removal that you mentioned?
What I've been doing, I pull it every year. Just keep on pulling it, just being as aggressive as they are. In the wintertime, it's easy to identify it and pull it. Wintertime is really the time I like to work in the cane brake. That's when you can easily identify where the honeysuckle is, pull it out. But we're not into chemicals. We don't do chemicals, so we do it all by hand, and we'll pull it out year after year after year till it's down to about nothing. And again, it's part of our tech and IKS, in that knowing that we have to keep on working on it year after year. Because these cane brakes, if you really want to grow big and strong, if you want to grow like a cane to make blowguns or baskets, you need to really go in there and take care of it, and it'll respond to it as well. River cane really likes to be managed. It likes to be walked around and mowed around so it can expand. So really, it's just pulling it out by hand. That's what we do. And then what we're going to do with the big cane grant is that we're going to identify those big sites with the privet or the Bradford pear, and then the Forest Service is going to poison it because we don't work with chemicals, but we'll isolate it and get it ready for them to do their thing with it. Awesome.
That makes a lot of sense. Sounds like a cool partnership. David, do you want to jump in with your question? I will say Ryan Spring says, burn it. Another way to control your invasives. David?
Yeah, so I have a property with, it's on the Cane River. It's at the head of the Nolichucky, and there's about 3 miles of riverfront, and it's in North Carolina. We've got what might be the largest cane brake in North Carolina. I don't know, and I'm trying to propagate it, but my problem is where to actually buy enough, cane to actually propagate it in a timely manner, because we're trying to outcompete the knotweed. Knotweed is a huge problem. And I'm wondering if you're aware of anybody who, sells cane in bulk, or, and also if you know of anybody who has been doing any experiments with river cane and knotweed as like a solution for keeping knotweed out.
So let's see. What I would do, it's really hard because there's only one nursery I know of here in the United States that does ship river cane, but not in a whole lot. They just have a little cane brake and they pull some out and they ship it out. And they're in Tennessee or Kentucky, I can't remember. And then there's a university, Southern Illinois University. They have a greenhouse where they've been doing river cane research for a while. And that press will be here at the River Cane Gathering. I'm excited to talk to them about that. I've been telling a lot of my friends in nursery stuff, they need to start growing river cane because there's a big push for it, But it grows really slow. I've got about 30 plants that are grown from seed. They're not very tall at all. They're maybe 3-4 feet tall. Which the best thing to do for that, if you're really trying to get that cane to grow in that knotweed, is to mow around that cane brake about 10 feet around it during the winter, and then in the summertime, just try and get those the shoots start coming up, and they'll start populating your field if you'll just start babying it that way. And then you can bend some of the culms down, some of the ones bend them down, put dirt on the top, and you can get it going faster into your field that way. But no, there's no places that's growing river cane right now. There needs to be.
All right. Well, I might start one.
Yeah, for sure.
Sounds like there's a gap in the market. I like this. And then turning that into money we can plow back into river cane restoration. Sounds like a fantastic business idea. A question from Michael Shafley in the chat. It sounds like you have an idea how much cane brake there used to be. Do you have a good idea of where it was historically and how it was distributed relative to the floodplain forests? Were they certain different microsites that those ecosystems would occupy? Were they mostly huge expanses, or were they kind of part of a fine scale mosaic where they were speckled in with each other?
That's a good question. The river cane I found just from going out ground truthing usually likes the second tier floodplain. It doesn't like the first tier floodplain because that gets washed out quite a bit. So your older ones will be up in the second tier, and the ones in the first tier will be like those ones that got washed out and torn up, but they're still going there. But I forgot the other part of the question of that. I got carried away there.
That's fine. Just about were the floodplain forests and the cane break sort of speckled in with one another, or did they tend to create big patches? Mm-hmm.
And where's the historical river cane is? That's a good question, because the one out in Barren Fork have been identified by be over 100 years old just by talking to people that are 80 years old, 70 years old, talking about how it was always there when they were kids. So, you can extrapolate and say at least 100 years old. But there's a couple of sites like here at Sequoia Refuge where Nuttall came through whenever he was trying to find the start of the Arkansas River. He came through and he talks about this huge cane break here on Arkansas River. It's there at Sequoia Refuge. We're looking for that area. And that was in the 1820s. And then there's another cane break in our areas. It's in the Ozark forest, and it was surveyed in 1819 when Arkansas was taking over. When Arkansas was forming a state, they were out there surveying. They surveyed a cane break there. We're looking for that. And a lot of your Civil War battles were conducted in cane breaks, and so those would be historic. Those would be old sites too. So you can go back. Those, if they're still cane in some of those Civil War battles, those ecosystems could be 150 years old, and that's pretty cool. And because they were at least 50 years old, because cane really grows slow. It grows like an oak tree. People think it grows really fast. It does not. Whenever we had this river cane gathering, we'll be able to show you how slow it goes back when our experiments we're doing at Refuge. But yeah, that's how you can tell. It's hard to tell. A lot of times remnant cane breaks will be on sides of bluffs, because that's where there's no farming and ranching goes on side of a bluff. So a lot of times you'll find cane on sides of bluffs. That's what I found from ground truthing.
Great, thank you. A question from Jason. Roger, would you be willing to share a little bit more about how tribal nations used cane for things like medicine or materials, and kind of the cultural usage of river cane with the tribe?
Oh, for sure. Tribes, our stomp dancers, our religious people, the Nighthawk Keetoowahs, the Cherokees, or the Seven Clans, or the Four Mothers of the southeastern tribes. They still use river cane on their ceremonial dances whenever they're making the stomp medicine, but we're making holy water, if you will, whenever they're getting ready for the grounds. They're using a piece of cane to blow into their water while they're doing their prayers. So they put the prayers into the water, so they're making holy water. They're still doing that today. It's still part of our practice in our cosmology. And so we're still using river cane that way. We're still making baskets out. We're still making blowguns out. But there's so much that we've lost because of the removal from our homelands into places where it's no longer there. I really think the Cherokees ended up here in northeast Oklahoma just because of the river cane, because of the ranchers and people in power had cattle and stuff, and they wanted a place to feed their cattle, and that's where all the cane was. Large amounts of cane were located here in northeast Oklahoma, and that was what would fuel a lot of the Cherokees getting some of the Cherokees here in the eastern band. If you look at the history parts, or the cattle coming into Cherokee country, into North Carolina, Georgia, and all that, you can see all the cattle coming into where the areas where the river were. So you can kind of extrapolate. So there was river cane there. So.
Thanks for sharing that. Some other thoughts in the chat. A question from Brian. Is there a generally accepted size or acreage of density that defines a cane break, as opposed to there just happen to be some river cane plants scattered within the landscape? Is there a threshold for like where you become a cane break?
Yes. Cane breaks really want to become big old mono ecosystems, and it's really neat when you come across one of those when they're like 20, 30 feet tall, and it's just all cane. Those are hard to come by. Those have all been wiped out. and they're hard to come by, and they're really neat when you come across them. That's where river cane strives to get. But what you have now are little remnant cane breaks, so they're about 5-6 feet tall, all kind of just broken out apart, little bushes stuff. But that's what our grant with the NIFWIT was all about, is getting them back to where river cane wants to be, a big old mono ecosystem. And there's no defining of that. I like to start talking more about that, how to evaluate cane breaks and how to tell if one's healthy or one's not. But there's nothing been done about cane breaks, and that's what's cool. That's what's exciting about people being interested in river cane, because it's a really cool ecosystem for the environment, culture. It has a lot to offer.
Cool. I mean, it sounds like those conversations are starting to happen now about how we define that, and right. I immediately want to go to the spatial side too and think about, like, how do we map it and how do we measure health and target sites for restoration and stuff. So that's a good question, Brian. That's all I have from the chat. Does anybody else have any questions for Roger? There have been some fantastic resources shared in the chat. Definitely keep an eye on that. Mark Kinzer, go for it.
Hi, good morning. I just have a question about the distinction between river cane and switch cane. It seems like a lot of the, quote, cane breaks that I encounter over in South Carolina and Georgia are not actually cane breaks like you're talking about, but they're really switch cane living underneath bottomland forest. There's a dense canopy overhead, and there's cane growing beneath, and I assume that that's switch cane as opposed to river cane, which I assume you're talking about. Can you talk about the difference between switch cane and river cane and restoration, et cetera?
Yeah, well, switch cane doesn't get very large. I've just learned. I've never really worked with switch cane. A lot of river cane growing under tree canopies, they'll exist there. That's pretty much what they are here in Northeast Oklahoma. They're growing under tree canopies, and if you can reduce the tree canopy above it, that cane will get larger. It'll get more dense, and it'll become a lot bigger and healthier ecosystem. But in the meantime, it's just surviving under the tree canopy. It'll do just fine underneath the tree canopy, but it'll get much larger and much more dense if the tree canopy was reduced. But you got to be careful, because we did one experiment at this one site where they had a bunch of tree canopy over the top of it. So we reduced the tree canopy, came back the next year, and honeysuckle had taken over the whole thing. So you got to be really careful. You take one out, you're going to get some other problems. So you really need to watch out for that. But really, tree canopy kind of inhibits the growth of the cane. Some of the good, better, older cane breaks I found that were great arrow size were in the tree canopies, and they were good 5-7-year-old cones. They'd make great arrows. I mean, they were maybe 1/4 inch diameter. They were all. But yeah, I have a hard time differentiating between switch cane and river cane myself.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Any other questions? We've got some time. We can take another 10 minutes for discussion if there's anything else on folks' minds.
Oh, I must add, river cane really does not go deep rooting system. It's maybe 12 inches, at the most 18 inches deep. When we do a transplant, they're no more than 12 inches deep into the soil. What happens a lot of times when a storm hits a cane break, the river cane kind of gets pulled up by the roots. Gets pulled up, and so the roots get exposed, and then as the rain comes through, it comes through there, and that's help filters it out. So river cane, it just kind of moves around and stuff during these storms, and it's pretty cool when you go out in a storm and you watch how it gets picked up, and then the roots get exposed and it captures the sediment.
Oh, that's really interesting. Paulina.
Hi. Yeah, I was just about to ask a question about like how river cane interacts during flood events with its environment. Like, well, maybe not necessarily interacts, but if it's a shallow rooting plant, is it possible for it to disperse like farther downstreams during flood events? Like how does it do with re-rooting if it's initially uprooted and then say it's deposited half a mile downstream where there isn't river cane currently? Like, is that a way for it to kind of spread along these river channels throughout these watersheds?
It gets spread that way. It does. But you got to remember, the river cane spreads out as rhizomes. So what it does, it really weaves itself into the ground. If you start pulling it up, you start seeing on the side of the bank, it just weaves itself into, it's like a carpet. And if you've ever had carpet on the ground, it's kind of hard to get once you get the dirt on there. That's the same concept with the river cane with the rhizomes. So a lot of time when it gets pushed on down, it picks up a whole little cane break and it pushes it down. Sometimes when a little rhizome with the comb will get knocked out, but really river cane just weaves itself into the ground. It's just like the basket patterns that tribes whenever they weave river cane baskets. It mimics the same thing underneath the ground with the rhizomes. River cane grows linearly. I haven't ever found river cane growing in circular fashion or anything, unless it's wrapped around a pool or a stream. But river cane grows linearly, and you can see that real easily when you're out in a cane break, and you can just see a straight line. You can see a rhizome, but that's how it does. It does straight lines and it weaves itself into the ground.
Very cool. Ryan Spring asks, is that why Tecta does better in more watery environments? And someone is agreeing that Tecta likes to have its feet wet more than giant cane in their experience. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. It can tolerate more water than river cane. River cane cannot take its roots getting submerged more than about a week, and then it falls off. But the switch cane seems to do better with it.
I've got one more question from the chat about the difficulty of transplanting river cane. Elena's heard that transplants can be really difficult to establish. Can you speak to that a little bit? And then Ryan, I'll take your question next.
I've found that when you transplant cane, is have the place that you're ready to transplant to, have it prepped and ready. And so the day you dig it up, you can put it back in the ground that day. I get about 100% rate when I do it that way. But the more days, more time you wait between digging it up and planting it, it goes down pretty quickly. Your success does. But if you replant the same day, you're doing well. I like to put manure in the hole whenever I transplant river cane, because river cane loves nitrogen. I haven't been able to burn up cane yet. So if you'll do it just pretty quick when you transplant it, and if you would transplant the edges of the cane break, because that's the runners, and those are the ones we expect to get out on their own. Those are the ones I like to go for. And then if you would, try not to transplant cane that's over about 3 or 4 feet tall, because if you try to transplant the big tall ones, the wind, it torques it out of the ground and the roots never get set unless you can fix that comb where it won't move. But the smaller the cane to transplant, the more success you'll be, because the wind won't whip it out of the ground.
Those are fantastic suggestions. Thank you. And then Ryan, I see that you have your hand up. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hey, just to add to what you're saying too, with your with transplanting cane, have you had luck with nursing it for a little while before you transplant it too?
Not when I'm digging it up, putting it back in the ground. I've had it from with the seeds, in pots and everything. That's
okay.
I've had better luck that way. But no, when I transplant, because usually what happens with river cane when you transplant it, it dies off. The combs, they'll have a hard time getting energy down into the rhizomes, but they'll still do it. You want to do it with some leaves still on your cane when you transplant, because that's how you get the light photosynthesis down into your roots. And so what'll happen when you transplant cane, it'll looks like it all dies off. And so you'll think, oh, it didn't even, but keep it watered. Keep it watered whenever during dry spells. Keep it watered. And within about 3 years, it's going to start shooting up and it'll start taking off. River cane takes about 3 years for it to recover from the transplant, and it'll start taking off. Another thing, when you transplant river cane, if you have a mixture around there where you can cut the combs, tops of it around the cane break you're transplanting, take it with you, and then spread it around the bottom of your transplant. That will help keep the moisture in the ground. And some reason river cane leaves have some kind of it's great mulching material. Nothing will grow through river cane leaves and combs. It's pretty neat. You put a bunch of them down and put cane middle up, it's going to grow. We'll have some videos out for it here for long.
Okay. So the question I actually had though was, so a lot of elders in Mississippi will talk about swamp cane. Do you think they're referring to, gigantea that's there growing around swamps, or do you think it's just Tecta that's getting big enough for them to make baskets with?
I have no idea. That's a whole different environment from here. Well, I've been studying. I really think there are different species of river cane. Like there's long leaf and short leaf. I really think it's not, we're just lumping them all together because nobody's really studied it. And so I think there could be a different species that's greater along the swamp areas, like you're saying. And there's others that do really well in the areas here that's a little bit drier here in Oklahoma. So,
cool. Well, I can't wait to take you down there sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to go to this River Cain gathering now. This is so fascinating. Any other questions before I wrap up with some staff updates and a preview of next month's webinar? So next month's web forum, I'm actually going to be giving the talk. So same time, same connection information as today. That'll be March 16th, 10 a.m. Eastern. And I'm going to be talking about some of the new ways to access the conservation blueprint data online through our Blueprint Explorer viewer and our SECAS Atlas. So the Explorer is a really simple online viewer. It's intended to make the blueprint really easy for anybody to access. You don't need high-tech software or any GIS expertise. Last year, we've added some exciting features with automated reporting that you might have seen, where you're able to upload a shape file and then export a blueprint report that looks at not just the blueprint priorities, but the corridors and the underlying indicators that occur in your area of interest. This year, we've added some great new features where you can drill into an individual pixel and see what's driving the blueprint priorities at that really fine scale. You can also start to do some really cool things with filtering, where you can say, show me the parts of the blueprint that score in this range on an indicator or that are projected to be impacted in this range by sea level rise. So I'm going to basically demo a lot of these cool new features and show y'all how to use them. We also, in addition to the Blueprint Explorer viewer, have the SECAS Atlas, which is an ArcGIS online hub site that kind of serves as a gateway to maps and data and other resources. So that's a place you can go to download the data and view the layers individually, read more about how the data is developed, create your own maps. So that's a little bit of a slightly more technical platform than the than the Blueprint Explorer, but kind of together we're trying to make that data super easy to access in whatever way that you might need. So tune in if you're interested in learning more about the viewers and want to see that live demo. And then lastly, I wanted to wrap up with some staff updates. Louise, who's one of the new user support leads for the Caribbean, is going to talk about the in-person Caribbean Community of Practice meeting that we just wrapped up in St. Croix. So Louise?
Yes, so one, as most of us know, we do an update to the blueprint about every year. This year, we are focusing on the Caribbean, where we're updating, we're expanding our consistency of methods of using indicators and our approach to create a blueprint down to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So our staff has been working really hard since this past October, since the last Blueprint 2022 release. We got right back on that hamster wheel, started developing new indicators that are appropriate down for the Caribbean and our partners down there. We have also been working through the umbrella of SECAS to create a community of practice with a lot of the amazing work down there to facilitate and offer to support of that existing community. So we went down there. We presented our very early on draft version of the blueprint down there. And as you see from Hillary's slide, we got a lot of really great feedback from the folks down there working. And so we were able to take that feedback back to our GIS team. And we are right back on that hamster wheel, making improvements to the blueprint. And then this spring, we will have a series of workshops that are focused on getting even more input from our stakeholders, users, and partners down in the Caribbean to refine and improve that next draft of the blueprint before we're able to finalize it and share it in its final release in October. It was really exciting. There's a lot of enthusiasm and momentum. And one thing that we hope to do is call attention that there are some data inequities with a lot of our data sets that we use on the mainland side of the blueprint. There's a lot of data that is lacking down there. So we are happy to be down there, support our partners, and try to call attention to expanding some of our existing data sets down that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Louise. It sounded like it was a great meeting. Alex Lamley, another user support person for the Caribbean, was down there as well, and Rua, who I'm sure most of y'all know, and they came back and reported out to SECAS staff just the other day so that we could start to brainstorm those indicator improvements. And it was so exciting to hear some of that feedback on how to improve our terrestrial indicators, some cultural resource indicators, freshwater indicators. We've got a lot of great ideas, and we'll try to fix what we can as part of this round of the revision cycle. As Louise said, more workshops to come. Mark your calendars for the last 2 weeks of May. That's where we're thinking we're going to have our workshops this year. There'll be some on the Caribbean, as Louise said, and then also some in the marine environment as well. We're also doing some improvements to the Atlantic marine environment and hopefully expanding to the Gulf of Mexico open water ocean area as well. So thank you so much, Louise. That's what happened with that meeting. Some of the latest stuff SECAS staff are working on. I have seen some conversation in the chat that folks would like to have Roger's contact information. Roger, if that's something that you're comfortable sharing, if you wouldn't mind dropping your email address in the chat, that would be great, or I can do that if you prefer. There is some interest in saving the contents of the chat. Yeah, I should be able to export that, y'all, and kind of bookmark those links. So I'll make sure to do that. And if somebody needs to get back to a resource from the chat, they're welcome to reach out to me. So I always like to end on this slide, how to get more involved in the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy. First thing is I encourage folks to sign up for the SECAS newsletter. You can do that from the footer of any page of the SECAS website, which is secassoutheast.org. That will get you our once monthly newsletter and a once monthly reminder email about this web forum, which is always the third Thursday of the month at 10 a.m. Eastern. So you'll never miss a talk that you're interested in. Of course, you can connect with your SECAS staff or partners. We have a staff page as well as a partners page that shows the organizations who are kind of participating formally in SECAS governance, though anyone is welcome to get involved, use the blueprint, review the blueprint, and share their feedback and get involved at that more grassroots level. And then lastly, I definitely encourage you to explore the Southeast Conservation Blueprint and let us know how it's working for you. If you would like to use it in a grant to inform a decision or a conservation plan, we have staff who are available to help you for free. We're called user support, and it's our job. We'd love to help you, so please reach out if you would like to talk about how the blueprint can be useful to you, or if you have any feedback on how we can improve it. So with that, I'm going to pause again to see whether there are any questions. Roger has put his contact information in the chat. Huge thank you, Roger, for this wonderful presentation, and appreciate you all for discussing and jumping in with the Q&A and making that so interactive. Any other questions for SECAS staff or for Roger? All right, no worries then. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.